In the previous videos, we built the walls and wrapped them in a breather membrane. Then we put a roof on and got things watertight. In this video, we'll be installing the windows and the doors. First job is to prepare the opening. In an existing building, that means removing the old window and tidying up the opening. On a new build like this, it means cutting the breather membrane. This is simple, but bizarrely I couldn't find any professional advice on how to do this. There are plenty of good American resources which give a detailed breakdown of the process and illustrate to me just how important it is to get this correct. But American windows are different to ours as they have an external flange. For this reason and a few others, it means that their advice isn't applicable to our buildings. But it is important to get this correct, because if it isn't, then the membrane won't be fully sealed around the windows and can even channel damp into the building. Most of DuPont's advice is for American houses, but I did find this diagram. This would suggest cutting an X into the membrane, then folding the resulting triangles back and taping the corners. This is the most common approach I've seen in the UK, but it does rely on a lot of tape to seal the vulnerable corners. DuPont also make this flex wrap tape, which covers the entire sill and stretches neatly around the corners. This provides complete protection for the entire sill, but for a small building like this where you only need about 3 meters, it's an expensive option when the roll costs about £100 and most will go unused. So not liking those options, I decided to go rogue and cut an I shape. In my mind, this has some big advantages. The sides will wrap neatly in an unbroken length. The excess can then be used to seal the bottom when overlapped like this. Again, this provides a large section of unbroken membrane with only a little tape required in the corners and to tidy up the flap. And I can do the same again for the top, although this time I tuck it in a little differently so moisture can never get trapped. We ordered the windows long before the walls were even built, so took extra care during construction to ensure that the openings matched the plans perfectly. Each window was ordered to be 10mm smaller in both the width and the height than its opening. This gives us a little wiggle room when we fit them. Here I'm measuring the window and its opening to double check that everything is as it should be. Installing the windows themselves is surprisingly easy if you follow these steps. First, you want to remove the glass element from the frame. To do that, you need to remove the glazing beads from the inside of the frame. Thing to remember here is each bead is unique to its side, so label them up first and then remove the long lengths first and then go on to the short lengths. There are a few items you will need to purchase. A glazing toolkit bundle is really helpful and I would thoroughly recommend purchasing one. The one that we used I'll link down below, as well as all the other items we used during this job. I have to say it took me some time to get used to the idea of hammering towards glass. My initial hits were very timid and I was very gentle with the tools, but after a little while I became familiar with what angles I needed to hammer at and what I needed to do, and quite quickly I became much more confident with them. Next on the agenda is fitting the sill. There's 2 options here, a straight cut or a rebate cut. We opted to go for a straight cut because it's going to fit better with the aesthetics that we're going for. When you measure up for the sill, don't forget to take into account the end caps that need to be super glued onto each end. You can then remove the protective corner guards from the bottom of the frame in anticipation of securing the sill to the window frame. Apply a bead of silicone along the sides and back edge of the sill and at any screw points. Then apply the sill to the bottom of the frame, center it and push it as far forwards as possible. This was our first time doing this, and we didn't realize how much downward pressure we would need to apply, but you really do need to push down hard so that it doesn't lift the sill up as you screw down. Find a screw that's the correct length, is exterior grade, and preferably with a button head. Then remove the remaining corner guards and lift the window frame into the building. Then use packers to hold the window secure in the building. Try to put the packers where you know there's going to be fixings later on, and keep the window level and square as you work. Put a fixing 150mm from the top and bottom, and then every 600mm. The reason you want to keep it 150 from the corners is so that you don't crack the frame. In this particular frame, we added 3 fixings on each side, and then 1 in the center at the top and bottom. We used 100mm concrete screws to secure the windows in place. These are a good option because they're strong, they're relatively cheap, they are exterior grade, and they've got a screw head type which won't damage the frame. You will need to pre-drill all the holes before putting in the fixings, and a word of warning, there's a steel bar that runs through the frame that can be a little tougher to get through. We also found it was a good idea to put a bit of masking tape over the rubber gasket to protect it while drilling. And then put some silicone in the holes before adding the fixing. Then thoroughly clean the frame and add packers to the bottom before adding the glazing. Moisture may build up in the bottom of the frame, and so these packers hold the glazing up high so that the moisture can move through the frame and to a vent and drain away. Then add packers between the glazing and the frame to hold the glazing nice and secure. That's all very straightforward in a top hung window like this, but in a side hung window you'll need to toe and heel the packers. This essentially forms a brace in the same way that you might get on a gate, so that the glass actually becomes a semi-structural component to stop that door sagging. You can actually lift or raise the door or window by altering the amount of packers you have in this toe and heel arrangement. And then refit the glazing beads in the reverse order to the way you took them out, so the short ones first and then the long ones. We found if you put the corners of the beads in first and then work your way to the middle, using light taps with a hammer when necessary. And then finally remove the protective tape. You don't want to leave this on too long because the sun can actually bake it in and make it very difficult to remove. And finally, on the outside you want to put a generous bead of silicone around the perimeter between the window frame and the building, including below the sill. On the inside you can fill that void with expanding foam to insulate that area. To fit the door you need to follow the same steps as the window with a few exceptions. To start out, remove the door itself, although if you have a glazed unit like this it may be an idea to remove the glazing from the door first, as it makes it a lot lighter and you will need to remove the glazing later on anyway. And then because the door is big and heavy, it's much easier for us to fit the sill to the building first and then put the door on top later. We put a generous amount of silicone down onto the building to create a nice watertight seal there, and then we screw the sill down. And then once we've checked that the sill is level, we can apply silicone to the same part as we did with the windows, and then we can fit the door frame. And then we add fixings in the same way that we did for the window, except this time we have to be a little bit more strategic because we want the door to be very secure, but also there's places that we can't put fixings due to the way the door's constructed. And then we can put the glazing in before dropping the door into position. I say dropping it into position, but it was heavy and it was awkward. If we'd removed the glazing, it would have made life a lot easier at this point. And if your door doesn't open and close perfectly, don't worry. There's lots of adjustment in the hinges, and if that doesn't work, you can play with the spaces in the glazing element to toe and heel it differently to raise and lower the door. There's always a way to make it work. And that's it, the windows and door are fitted and we couldn't be happier. It all went very smoothly and the building's really starting to take shape now. In the next video we're going to be fitting the cladding to the building, but a little insight into what's going on behind the scenes is it's not going to plan, so that video might be delayed by an extra week or two. So until then, cheerio!